Greetings, everyone. My name is Victoria Steele. An earlier version of the following talk was given in January 2022 at the invitation of Carol Carruthers, Program Chair of Los Doñas, a UCLA support group. Over the next 50 minutes, I'll be giving you a virtual tour of UCLA's little-known art and design gems. I will be focusing on some favorite rooms, less well-known campus buildings, and art. I won't cover the sculpture garden because it's not little known and many of you have already seen it, nor the Clark Library, which is off campus. We'll travel around the campus from the south to the north. As we go along, make note of your favorites. What's the most surprising thing you see? The most fun? The prettiest building or favorite room? A favorite painting or drawing? A favorite sculpture? How do I know about our art? Because I created an inventory of UCLA's public art between 2018 and 19 at the invitation of Administrative Vice Chancellor Michael Beck. My database contains more than 500 works, paintings, prints, drawings, sculpture, mosaics, and murals. It does not include decorative items, posters, reproductions, loaned work, portraits of founders unless by noted artists, rotating student work, or photos of campus history, nor does it contain work under the curatorial purview of the Feller Museum, the Hammer Museum, or the Medical Center Art Collection. As we travel around the campus, I will try to keep you oriented by means of a laser pointer down here so you can follow where we're going. And we are going to begin down here on our iCampus. So let me orient you to the iCampus. It consists of 3 buildings: the Jules Stein Eye Institute, which was built in 1966, the Doris Stein Eye Research Center, 1984. Doris Stein was the widow of Jules Stein, and the Wasserman Building, which opened in 2014. But I want to draw your attention now to this low and rather unprepossessing annex-like structure here, where we'll have a look at the Atom Room, the least seen, prettiest, and oldest room on campus. This room, remarkably enough, dates to the late 1780s. It was designed by the prominent 18th century Scottish-English architect and interior designer Robert Adam, who is known for his light, elegant rooms and for his beautiful plasterwork ceilings. Adam created this room for the Bennell family, whose manor was known as Upton House, which was in the countryside in Essex, England. Well, 180 years later, by 1960, Essex had been encroached upon by East London, and the manor had disintegrated. This room ended up at an antiques fair, where it was purchased by Jules Stein, who reinstalled it in his New York City apartment. The Steins, as we shall see, had a penchant for period rooms. Note the bespoke rug, the beautiful chandelier, which is not original but gorgeous, and the portrait sketch of Doris Stein. Original elements in the room are this fireplace, these columns, the moldings, the bookcases, the mirrors, and the consoles. What is not original in the room is the ceiling, which was recreated when the room came to UCLA. Nor are the pastoral images at either end of the north and south ends of the room. These are block printed wallpaper, probably French, dating to circa 1800. They were required to fill in for where windows once were in the Stein's apartment, and they're really beautiful. So how did the room get to UCLA? After the death of the Steins, the room was once again on the auction block. This time, Doris Stein's son from her first marriage, Gerald Oppenheimer, decided to purchase the room and donate it to UCLA. The reinstalled room was opened in 1989. Today it's used for special events. So now we are moving from this area where the Atom Room is, and we're entering the Jules Stein Eye Institute proper, where we are going to have a look at the seminar room, a lovely 1920s room that used to be in the entryway to Marion Davies' beach house. Marion Davies was a famous actress and also the mistress of William Randolph Hearst, who built this 110-room mansion on the beach in Santa Monica. It was created by Julia Morgan, the first licensed woman architect in California. Julia Morgan was also the architect of Hearst Castle. We believe our room came from the entry area here. In 1956, most of the mansion was torn down. Prior to demolition, Jules Stein bought our room. Today, however, a part of the property survives, namely this area, the guest house, which you can tour. The rest of the former beach house site is now occupied by the Annenberg Community Beach House, a lovely amenity for the public. Back to the room. This room has another impressive chandelier and two large Toulouse-Lautrec prints, which I'm going to tell you about now. The person on the left is Misia Serre, an important patron of the arts in her day. Do note her great outfit. The image on the right is the most acclaimed of all of Toulouse-Lautrec's prints. It's of Jane Averill, a famous dancer, here doing the can-can. The sexual overtones in this image are unmistakable, what with the phallic neck of the base, which morphs into a border for the entire print. The point of view is not only that of the audience, but also the musicians. And we can see a profile of the bass player here. Talk about the male gaze, eh? As you can see, poor Jane looks exhausted and none too happy. Now, right next door to the seminar room and connected to it is the Dor Stein Reading Room, another pretty room. This room was once part of an 18th century townhouse in London, and at one time was the home of the Earl of Dudley. It has many nice antiques, especially this gilt-tooled red leather top table. Okay, now we're walking out a door right here, and we're walking down a hallway to visit another period room of an altogether different sort. This one is from the 1960s. This is The Small World, a ceramic tile mural created by Mary Blair, the designer of the Small World attraction at Disneyland. It was commissioned by Walt Disney himself as a gift for the Steins and was specifically created as a pediatrics waiting area. Here on the wall you can see Walt Disney's signature and that of Mary Blair. A few words about Mary Blair. She was the most successful of all the women artists who worked for Disney, and as you can see, she was beautiful. She created the concept art for the films Cinderella, Peter Pan, and Alice in Wonderland. She also illustrated children's books. It would be fair to say that her popularity has grown with time. She has many superfans today. Over time, the mural had become dirty and nicked because patient chairs were pushed right up against it. So in 2018, I arranged for our friends from Sculpture Conservation Studio in West LA to come and give it a cleaning and to restore the areas of loss. The mural has lots of fun details, like this lion with a curly mane, and there's a little snail down here. But above all, it has got this fabulous clock. At the time of the cleaning, this gray clock hadn't worked for 40 years. It was stuck at 10:30. The story of how we got it working again is a good one. but in the interest of time, I will thank my friend Michael Heafy and the electrical shop on our campus who got it working again. Okay, so let's leave Stein and head over from here to the Factor building, which houses the School of Nursing and other departments. Here I was very surprised to find a 30-foot long mural by Millard Sheets and Susan Hertel from 1958. Millard Sheets was a very big name in Southern California from the 1930s through the 1980s. Many of his large-scale building-mounted mosaics can still be seen all over Southern California, particularly on the facades of what used to be Home Savings and Loan, but is now Chase Bank. Unfortunately, this mural also has a lot of nicks, and getting it restored is on my wish list. It also needs a protective barrier, as you can see from the slide of nursing students leaning against it. Okay, we are leaving the Factor building and just popping across the street to enter the Mildred Mathias Botanical Garden in order to see our new Le Kretz Garden Pavilion, which opened in fall 2017. It was designed by architect and landscape architect Mia Lehrer. Sadly, because of the pandemic, many people have yet to see this lovely pavilion. As you can see, the superstructure somewhat resembles a bird's nest. The pavilion itself, this area, can be configured in different ways depending on whether the space is being used for classes, lectures, or even parties. All the doors open seamlessly to the outside. Here's a bird's eye view of the pavilion. I love this building, and of course, the Botanical Garden is a campus treasure. So we're just leaving the garden and we're walking up along the side of it and swinging around the corner to go to this building, which is the Le Kretz Botany Building, which opened originally in 1957. Here's something few people are aware of. The architect of our Botany Building was the highly regarded Black architect Paul Williams, and this was the first project commissioned solely to his firm by a prominent institution. Isn't that something? It's so cool that UCLA took a chance on this young architect. Paul Williams, as you may know, had quite a journey. When he was a child, both of his parents died of tuberculosis. After their deaths, he and his brother were placed in foster care in separate homes. Williams was the only Black child in his elementary school. A bright boy, he aspired to be an architect, but he was told, Black people can't afford architects, and white people won't hire you. Well, he proved them wrong. Williams had a successful career designing the homes of numerous celebrities, including Frank Sinatra, Lon Chaney, Barbara Stanwyck, Lucille Ball, and Desi Arnaz. He was actually known as the architect to the stars. In 2019, Co-Architects was engaged to undertake an upgrade of the building, and they did so very respectfully. Looking into Paul Williams' archives, they discovered an unrealized project for a glass mosaic mural with a plant motif. They decided it would be perfect for our building, and using the original sketch, engaged a company called Archaic to reconstruct it. They based the color palette on Williams' iconic banana leaf wallpaper in the Beverly Hills Hotel, which was a lovely idea. And I'll show you a couple of details of the reconstructed mural here. Now we are walking over to Myra Hershey Hall from here, just a short walk over to Myra Hershey Hall, which in my opinion is the loveliest early campus building dating from 1931. Myra Hershey was not only UCLA's first dorm, but also one that was created exclusively for women. Why was this women's dorm such a priority for the campus? Because women couldn't live off campus unsupervised, as men could. Originally, the entrance was on Hillgard, but now the entrance is on the west side. This thing is a plaque, which I'm going to show you a better image of now. Beautiful plaque. And now, here's a slide of Myra Hershey herself. This is the only known portrait of her. It dates from around 1876. She was born in Pennsylvania, but her family moved to Iowa when she was 10. Her father was a very wealthy lumber and farming magnate, and yes, her family was distantly related to the Hershey chocolate family. Now, when Myra Hershey was coming of age, there must have been an assumption she would marry, and perhaps some pressure to do so, but she never did. Instead, she went to college. There are two things that are remarkable about this. First, when Myra Hershey was in her late teens, early 20s, the Civil War was in progress. Second, Myra Hershey attended the first women's college in the U.S., Pennsylvania Female College. Pennsylvania Female College was the first non-denominational college for women that had degree-conferring powers. This set it apart from the other existing institutions of higher learning, which were either connected with religious institutions or which were more like finishing schools and didn't confer degrees. In case you're thinking, what? Pennsylvania Female College preceded Vassar, Smith, Wellesley, and Bryn Mawr? Yes, they were all established later. Well, after college and then spending some time in Europe, Myra Hershey went to work for the family business. So she had an actual job, and it turned out she was really good at it. After her father died, Myra Hershey moved to Los Angeles in 1894 when she was 51. She became a successful investor and real estate developer. Among the properties she owned was the Hollywood Hotel, the place to stay for early film stars. When Myra Hershey died in 1930 at the age of 86, she left a surprise bequest of $300,000 to UCLA for a women's dorm. Having attended a women's college and having lived an unusually independent life, the notion of supporting UCLA's women students must have appealed to her. So let's look at the building. This is a slide of the South Courtyard. The architecture of Myra Hershey Hall has a feminine feeling. It's light and early Italian Renaissance in style. It's such a contrast to the other early buildings on the campus, which are massive, stately, and made of brick. Today, all the former dorm rooms are offices for biology administration. Here's a slide of the inner courtyard, which has beautiful fruit trees along here, lemon and pomegranate. Here's another slide of that inner courtyard with its lovely colonnade. And here's a slide of the beautiful Myra Hershey Salon. A couple of years ago, I worked on a project to enhance the art in Myra Hershey Hall. In thinking about how I could reinforce the 1930s feeling of the building, it occurred to me to have a look into the early yearbooks of the campus. Fortunately, these had been digitized. I'm going to talk about some of the images I found and used in this room, the first of which is this one here. I found a fun surprise in the 1928 yearbook. This artist, Ackerman, created an image of the main quad of UCLA when the 4 original campus buildings were still under construction. The quad actually looked like this. So Ackerman's view is imaginary. There are no cypress trees or eucalyptus trees, either then or now, and you certainly can't see snow-capped mountains to the east. Still, I think it's very fun and charming. I also found 10 watercolors from 1930 that were created by an artist named Arthur Beaumont as a commission for the 1931 UCLA Student Yearbook. And here are just a couple of slides of some of those lovely watercolors. Okay, we are leaving Meyer Hershey Hall here, and we are walking over here into the Court of Sciences. And I am going to draw your attention to these crisscrossing architectural elements connecting the various buildings that make up the California Nanosystems Institute around and above Parking Lot 9. In the early 2000s, when UCLA was looking for a site on the South Campus on which to create the California Nanosystems Institute, the only site that was available was basically a narrow and steep area, largely occupied by an existing and essential parking lot. All these preconditions presented design challenges to architect Raphael Vignoli, but instead of viewing them as obstacles, Vignoli saw them as starting points for his design. His creative and fun solution was to build a series of zigzagging bridges and stairs, which seemed to have been inspired by the Dutch graphic artist M.C. Escher. In addition to the bridges and stairs being fun, they serve an important practical function by enabling physical interactions among students and researchers. And just to remind you, here's M.C. Escher, whose work, as you know, plays with perspective, and some of it features impossible stairs. Okay, so now we are crossing from this building and just walking across this little street that's almost even like an alley, and we're entering Bolter Hall, where we will encounter a surprise. So what is this? When you work out the code in the tiles, it turns out to be binary code, and it says, "Lo and behold." Why did the architect who was remodeling this entrance choose to secretly place this coded message in the floor tiles? The explanation has to do with the birth of the internet. Here's the father of the internet, Professor Leonard Kleinrock, who developed the mathematics that made the internet possible and whose team sent the first internet message. And here's the room in Bolter Hall where this first internet message was sent. A few years ago, this room was recreated to look as it did in 1969. Though the room is locked, it has a glass door so you can get a good look at the room from the outside. So here's what happened. This thing is called an interface message processor, an IMP, the first piece of internet equipment. In September 1969, UCLA got the first IMP from a government agency called ARPA. In October 1969, Stanford got the second one. The two IMPs were connected computer to computer, that is, host to host, via a backbone line. Once all this was in place, the next step was to log in and see if the setup would work. But the guy on our computer, Charlie Klein, had no way of telling if the message he was sending to Bill Duvall at Stanford was actually going from our IMP to Stanford's IMP. In a case of supreme irony, the only way they could tell was to be on the phone with each other. So here's how the whole thing played out. Charlie types an L, and speaking to Bill on the phone, asks, "Did you get the L?" Bill says, "Yep, got the L." Charlie says, "Just sent you the O. Did you get the O?" "Yep." Then Charlie sends the G, and the system crashes. So the actual first internet message was LO, as in lo and behold, which turned out to be perfect, almost biblical. Ha! Okay, so now we're heading next door to the Math Sciences building to have a look at a great piece of art, a big tile eye, a pixelated eye, surmounted by yet another coded message. So let's have a look. When I first came across this piece, it had no label, but I thought it was fantastic and really intriguing. Who made it and when? I started trying to find out about it. I popped into various administrative offices in the vicinity of the piece, but I was met with shrugs. Finally, a young and helpful assistant in the math department office suggested I reach out to a particular emeritus professor who was able to enlighten me. The eye was created by a faculty member named Raymond Redheffer, who served on our faculty for 55 years. Dr. Redheffer was a leading scholar, highly regarded teacher, and is credited with creating one of the first electronic games. He also had a number of unusual talents, including being an accomplished pianist and mountaineer. A colorful character, he was given to demonstrating his physical prowess by performing one-armed push-ups during his lectures. As for the coded message, can you figure it out? What code is it? It's not binary code. It's not ASCII. It's Morse code. The message is, "Let there be light," the motto of the University of California. By the way, the eye now has a label. Okay, so now we are heading from the Math Sciences building and crossing the Court of Sciences and entering the Geology building to have a look at the Meteorite Gallery, which opened in 2014 and is the largest collection of meteorites on the West Coast. It's also the second largest collection housed in a university and the fifth largest collection of meteorites in the United States. So it's a very substantial collection and quite interesting. You can see that the gallery has museum-style lighting and informative displays. If you've ever wondered what the oldest thing is on campus, the answer would be in the plural, things, and they would be here. Some of these meteorites are 4.5 billion years old. Okay, so now we're headed upstairs to the Geology Library, where there's a fun display of a suite of paintings by Astrid Preston, a UCLA alumna and successful artist. In 2015, she was commissioned by the city of Santa Monica to create paintings of the city's flora and fauna. These paintings were turned into banners for the 3rd Street Promenade. Astrid kindly donated the original paintings to us. Thank you to her. Now we are walking from the Geology building to a building right up here where I'm going to show you another basically surprise building. Though it's not particularly striking on the outside, it was designed by none other than Frank Gehry and was his first LA project in 1977. Some of you will know that Frank Gehry made his first early splash as an architect with the design of his own house in Santa Monica, in which he used unconventional materials like chain link fencing and corrugated steel. The Gehry house was built a year after our building. So our building is another example of UCLA engaging the services of an emerging architect who went on to have an important career, much as we saw with Paul Williams and his botany building. So now we are just taking a quick pop across the street and walking along the north side of the Math Sciences building to have a look at a wonderful mid-century modern mosaic mural by Joseph Young dating to 1958. It has lots of fun details and it's well worth really looking at. Here are a couple of fun details. Unfortunately, a couple of years ago, tree branches were hitting the mural on the west, and the west side was covered in bramble. I really want to give a shout out to Assistant Vice Chancellor Facilities Management Kelly Schmader and his grounds staff for quickly responding to my request for tree trimming and the removal of the bramble. Here's a slide of that section cleaned up. Okay, so now we are heading over to Ackerman Union to have a look at a mural called The Black Experience. This piece was created in 1970 in the aftermath of nationwide anti-Vietnam War protests, which triggered serious unrest on many college campuses, including our own. In response to the turmoil, 7 of our Black art students decided that a constructive action would be to create a Black Pride mural. The mural is located on level 1 of Ackerman Union in the food court, where there are numerous food franchises. During renovations to one of these franchises in 1992, a false wall was erected that covered the mural for 2 decades. But some people remembered the mural, and a project was undertaken to restore it to public view. The false wall was removed, and in 2014, the mural was enthusiastically rededicated. As you can see, it's got a lot of great willpower. Speaking of power, we are now leaving Ackerman Union. We are walking up Ruin Walk into the quad, across the quad, and up to Perloff Hall here, which is the home of UCLA Architecture and Urban Design. And we're going to enter the building from the southeast entrance to see a gorgeous piece of art. This cast iron panel is by Louis Sullivan and was originally on the exterior of Chicago's Gage building. Dating to 1898-99, it's high Art Nouveau and so beautiful. It's technically part of the Sculpture Garden collection, but it was moved indoors for conservation reasons. Interesting factoid, it's the oldest piece in the Sculpture Garden collection. I really encourage you to make a point of seeing it in person because photos don't do it justice. Looking at our map again, Perloff Hall, we are now walking over to Bunch Hall, where we are going to go up to the 6th floor to see another big mural by Terry Schoenhoven. Schoenhoven was part of a group called the Fine Art Squad that made wall paintings around Los Angeles between 1969 and 79. The Fine Art Squad frequently depicted apocalyptic scenes, like this one that shows the Young Research Library in ruins after a big earthquake wipes out Los Angeles. Having worked in the research library for many years, I find this image very disturbing. So we're quickly leaving this space and heading over to the actual intact library, where we will visit the booth room and special collections to have a look at our Picasso here. This very important painting dates to 1909 and is called Homage à Gertrude, as in Gertrude Stein. Picasso and Gertrude Stein were close friends. Picasso painted this famous portrait of her, now at the Met, between 1905 and 1906. It reportedly required 90 sittings. During the early years of Picasso's career, Gertrude and her siblings were pretty much the only collectors of Picasso's work. In 1909, Picasso created our painting as a gift to Gertrude, and it was specifically intended as a ceiling decoration. It was literally nailed to the ceiling above her bed, and the nail holes are still clearly visible on the original, though you can't see them in this reproduction. The painting shows women and angels all celebrating Picasso's patron. Moving on from the research library, we're now heading up to the Broad Art Center to see a monumental graphite wall drawing. It's about 5 by 7 by Maleko Mkosi. The piece was commissioned in 2011 by former Associate Dean of Arts Barbara Drucker, who asked the artist, then a graduate student in our MFA program, to create a work of art on a big blank wall outside the Dean's Suite. It's drawn directly on the wall and is a masterpiece of draftsmanship. The artist was born in Botswana, and the image recalls the kinds of women he saw when he was growing up. Here's a detail. Only 10 years after receiving his MFA from UCLA, Maleko Mkosi was a full professor of art at Yale and an international art star. It is simply amazing that we have this early example of his work, which is a knockout. Now we are traveling from the Broad Art Center, and we're going to head over to the mini campus of the Anderson Graduate School of Management, which has 140 works in 7 buildings, curated by my dear friend, Professor Don Morrison. There's a lot of work to appreciate in the various buildings, and I encourage you to check it out. I'm going to point out the Collins Center building, which we're going to visit for a second, because it has a very pretty rotunda and a nice piece of sculpture by Guy Dill. Just outside the Collins Center, there's a fun Fletcher Benton sculpture, and here are just a couple of other pieces of art that you can see around the Anderson School. I also encourage you to check out the architecture of the Anderson School. One of my favorite architectural features on the entire UCLA campus is this, variously known as the slit or the slot. In 1995, when architect Harry Cobb was designing the original 6 buildings of the Anderson School, he had the idea of creating 2 flat minimalist towers separated by a slit. The towers are not functional, as you can see in this side view, but decorative in effect. As you can see, the slit really draws your gaze. As we face the slit, we're looking north towards Sunset Boulevard. If you turn around and face south, you will see the 2 towers of Kirchhoff Hall in the distance. The slit is a deliberate, though subtle, visual reference to them. Onward to see the first of 2 art rescue and relocation projects. We're up here, and the first relocation and rescue project involves the West Center right there. So this first project involves Victor Salmonis' sculpture called Force, which we acquired in 1979. This was a case of a good piece of art in an obscure location, a balcony of the West Center. The piece was in very poor condition, covered with bird droppings, sap, and dirt. It was painfully desiccated and showed signs of water damage. It was also on a too low and too small base. About a year ago, I noticed an empty plinth with a marble base in front of Murphy Hall. The plinth and base were clearly intended for a sculpture that was never acquired. Because the plinth and base were empty, it kind of looked like a tomb to some people, and this gave rise to a campus urban legend that it actually was a tomb, that of our late great Chancellor Franklin Murphy. Well, you can see where this is going. I realized that the Salmonis sculpture would be perfect for this spot. It took 2.5 years of effort, but here's what the sculpture looks like now, following restoration and reinstallation. Heartfelt thanks once again to Kelly Schmader, our fabulous Assistant Vice Chancellor for Facilities Management, Matt DeYoung, the project manager who handled so many complex logistics involving this labor of love, and Andrea Morse and her team at Sculpture Conservation Studio for making the piece look gorgeous. A second recent art rescue project involves a charming fountain by master fountain maker George Tsutakawa. This was installed in front of the School of Public Health in 1967 and remained there until 2011, when the School of Public Health underwent a remodeling, and this pretty rotunda had to be sacrificed for conference rooms and office space. The fountain was turned off, suffered some abuse, but then was carefully deinstalled and put into storage, where it remained for more than 10 years. Having always loved the fountain, I wanted to bring it back. I found the perfect spot for it at the faculty club, just behind this wall where the address is, and it was reinstalled here during the summer of 2022. I've got a little video. Makes a beautiful sound. It's so sweet and so charming. Okay, we are moving on. I'm supplying this slightly easier to read map for this particular travel plan. Here's the faculty center, and we are going all the way down here, and we are going to end up at the Rennie and Meyer Luskin Conference Center. The Conference Center opened in 2016 and already has a collection of nearly 100 works, all of which have a connection to UCLA. That is, the artists are either graduates of the program or have been on our faculty. This idea was the brainchild of Assistant Vice Chancellor Pete Angeles, who has done a magnificent job assembling this collection. We only have time for a quick flyby at Luskin. There's so much to see here. I encourage you to explore this terrific collection, which is not a hidden gem at all, but very open, accessible, and wonderful. Do check it out. So now, before I say goodbye, I want to ask you to take a moment to think back on what we've seen. What were your favorites? What was the most surprising thing? The Escher-inspired bridges and chairs? The coded message in the floor tile over in Boulter Hall? The Meteorite gallery? How about your favorite room? The Atom Room, perhaps? The prettiest early building? I hope some of you like Myra Hershey Hall as much as I do. The coolest new building? Well, there would be, as a possible choice, the Lacretz Pavilion. What was your favorite painting or drawing? Maybe our Picasso? Maybe Maleka Mokozi's Head of a Woman? In the most fun category, don't forget The Small World by Mary Blair. Or perhaps you prefer The Slit, which is quite fun too. As for the most historic venue, well, the birthplace of the internet is hard to beat. We have only scratched the surface on our whirlwind tour. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send me an email at vsteele@ucla.edu. With that, I will conclude our tour, and thank you for joining me.